The Atlantic Ocean is not merely a body of water, it is a repository of souls. It is a vast, liquid graveyard containing approximately 6 million graves, the bones of kings, queens, griots, and warriors, scattered like seeds across a seabed that still whispers names the world has tried to erase. When we speak of history, we are not discussing the distant past. We are discussing the silence you carry in your blood and the ledger in which every lash of the whip was recorded by a power older than any nation-state. To understand the current state of our world, one must realize that the founding documents of modern empires were carved out of parchment at the same moment whips were being carved from leather. This is not a coincidence of history. It is the manifestation of a theological and political blueprint that remains active today. Revelation 13 is not a static text of ancient ink. It is a living, breathing reality that examines the rise of a system described as a beast emerging from the sea. Its scales glitter with the same arrogance that once built plantations on stolen land and exploited labor, and its mouth speaks the same blasphemies echoed in modern courtrooms that deny systemic reparations.
To look at the soul of a nation, one must examine its watermark. The same draconic energy that once pursued ancient civilizations now fuels the engines of a high-tech surveillance state. When John of Patmos wrote of the beast in Revelation 13, he was not describing a literal monster from a myth. He was exposing the architectural blueprint of empire. He described a system where 7 heads are crowned and 10 horns are armed, a lion's roar that spits lies wrapped in the veneer of patriotism. The text notes that the whole world marveled and followed this beast. This marveling is a profound psychological seduction. It is the process by which chains are rebranded as opportunity. Stolen land is called manifest destiny, and stolen time is marketed as a dream. We see this marveling today when institutional milestones are celebrated while the underlying systemic inequality remains untouched. Statistically, the disparity is staggering. While the United States represents approximately 4% of the global population, it holds roughly 20% of the world's prison population, a disproportionate number of whom are descendants of those who survived the Middle Passage. This is the beast's oldest deception, convincing the marginalized to applaud the very mechanisms of their own containment. The Greek term used in the manuscripts for this beast is therion, which denotes a venomous predator that stalks in darkness. This predator does not always strike with a physical blow. It strikes through a spiritual and systemic operating system known as the mark. Contrary to popular sensationalism, this mark is not merely a barcode on a forehead. It is a system of total economic and social integration. It is the requirement to trade one's divine birthright for basic survival. We see the historical precedents for this in the auction blocks, where human bodies were branded like cattle. This was a physical mark, but it was accompanied by a psychological brand, a theology that taught the oppressed to believe they were cursed, using the curse of Ham as a justification for centuries of servitude. Today, that mark has been upgraded into a digital and financial reality. It is found in credit scores that determine a person's mobility from birth to death, in algorithms that track faces in over-policed neighborhoods, and in voter ID laws that function as modern iterations of historical literacy tests. We must examine the precision of the divine clock. In Genesis 15:13, a warning was given that a specific people would be strangers in a land not their own, enslaved and mistreated for 400 years. History records that in 1619, the first ship carrying enslaved Africans arrived at Point Comfort, Virginia. Exactly 4 centuries later, in 2019, the world witnessed a global ignition of social unrest and a pandemic that exposed which bodies the state deemed disposable. This math is surgical. Between 1525 and 1866, according to the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database, 12.5 million Africans were shipped to the New World, with 10.7 million surviving the grueling Middle Passage. Every empire that has fed on this labor has faced a countdown. Egypt, Babylon, and Rome all met their respective ends when their corruption reached a tipping point. As of 2025, the American experiment is 249 years old, approaching a historical threshold where the joints of the system begin to creak under the weight of division and internal decay. Consider the reality of 1831 on a Virginia plantation where the internal resistance was already being formulated through the lens of Scripture. While overseers used the Bible to demand submission, the enslaved were reading Deuteronomy 28:48, which warned of an iron yoke being placed on the neck until destruction. They recognized the distant nation mentioned in verse 49, a nation whose language they did not understand, which manifested as complex legal insurance policies on human lives and mortgage deeds on stolen bones. The beast's favorite weapon has never been just the whip, it has always been the pen. In the modern era, that pen writes the fine print of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery except as punishment for a crime. This single loophole has allowed the recycling of labor through a prison industrial complex, where currently over 2 million people are incarcerated, fueling a multi-billion-dollar industry that trades human lives on the stock market. The second beast, described in Revelation 13:11, rises from the earth, possessing horns like a lamb, but speaking like a dragon. Scholars often identify this as a false prophetic voice, a religious infrastructure that provides moral cover for systemic cruelty. This is the history of the white evangelical movement that blessed slave auctions and the modern prosperity gospel that sells hope for a fee while ignoring the systemic roots of poverty. True spiritual resistance has always been an underground railroad. It was Harriet Tubman carrying a pistol and a psalm. It was the secret hush harbors where the enslaved gathered to pray for the downfall of the very system that claimed to be Christian. The beast's second head seeks to turn altars into ATMs and communion into control. But the response must be wisdom, Sophia, the kind of wisdom that built the libraries of Timbuktu while Europe was in its dark ages. When we analyze the economic structures of the beast, we must look at the domestic breeding systems established after the 1808 ban on the international slave trade. Senator James Jackson of Georgia and others discussed the need to multiply stock domestically, turning motherhood into a harvest and fathers into studs. This was the literal fulfillment of Deuteronomy 28:53. Today, that same commodification exists in the school-to-prison pipeline, where zip codes are used by private corporations to predict future prison bed needs. The system does not care about the color of a soul, it cares about the silence of the subject. However, there is a pattern of collapse that cannot be erased. Historically, empires built on the extraction of life often face a reckoning within 250 years. We are standing at that horizon. In the archives of the Vatican, documents like the 1452 Dum Diversus Decree by Pope Nicholas V authorized the invasion and perpetual slavery of non-Christian peoples. This was not just a policy, it was the declaration of a spiritual war that persists in the patterns of global debt and the privatization of essential resources like water in developing nations. The counterstrike to this is found in Revelation 12:11. They triumphed by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Testimony is a weapon. It is why the state has historically feared the voices of Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, and Nina Simone. They fear the day the marginalized stop whispering their pain and start declaring their prophecy. When you reclaim your true name and your history, you jam the tracking signals of the system. The beast's greatest deception is its invisibility. It hides in plain sight as security, common sense, and economic progress. We are told that segregation ended with Brown v. Board of Education, yet today, schools in major urban centers are more segregated than they were in the 1960s. We are told the economy is recovering, but the median wealth for white families is roughly 8 times higher than that of black families. This is not a failure of the system. It is the system functioning exactly as designed. The beast recycles its diet. It turned the 13th Amendment into a revolving door and turned the war on drugs into a mechanism for removing millions of voters from the rolls. True rebellion, therefore, is not found in violence, but in the construction of a parallel reality. It is the formation of community land trusts, the establishment of credit unions that circulate wealth within the community, and the homeschooling of children with curricula that reflect their royal lineage. This is the worship the beast fears: organized, joy-filled, and self-sufficient communities. When you choose to feed your neighbor instead of a corporation, or when you mentor a child instead of scrolling through an algorithm designed to fracture your attention, you are performing an act of holy resistance.
As we look toward the year 2030, the systems of oppression will increasingly face internal contradictions. Revelation 13:3 speaks of a fatal wound that was healed, indicating that empires often rise from their own ashes by inventing new forms of bondage, from sharecropping to student debt, from the auction block to the credit score. But the eye of discernment remains our inheritance. We must see the beast for what it is, without bowing to its inevitability. Like the survivors of previous empires, the remnant today must prepare not through panic, but through positioning. The God who split the sea and brought down the walls of Jericho is the same God who calls for a Sankofa moment, a return to fetch the wisdom of the past to secure the future.
The 400-year timeline has concluded, and we are now in the season of the return. This return is not necessarily a physical migration, though millions are relocating to the south to reclaim ancestral land, but a spiritual return to authority. It is a refusal to accept the mark of the beast on the mind. It is the realization that you are not a statistic or a demographic. You are a mission. The beast's mark is a dead end, but the mark of the Creator is a doorway. By building cooperatives, protecting our elders, and educating our youth in the truth of their covenant, we dismantle the beast one block at a time. The clock is not just ticking, it is screaming. The bones are rattling, and the army is rising. It is time to walk through the doorway of sovereignty and leave the shadows of the empire behind. The final word of this era is not one of defeat, but of resurrection. We are witnessing the convergence of prophecy and history. Every act of love, every reclaimed acre of land, and every word of truth spoken in a world of lies is a nail in the coffin of the beast. We overcome by our testimony, by our unity, and by our refusal to be silenced. The fire of the Spirit is falling, and it is not here to destroy. It is here to purify and to lead us into a kingdom where the first shall be last, and the last shall inherit the earth. The gates of hell will not prevail, because they cannot contain a people who have finally remembered who they are.